Okay, we turn now to CGTN's Mariam Zaidi, who is at the European Parliament building in Brussels. And Mariam, as Gerald pointed out, Brexit is still a cloud over Europe. There is still no deal on how Britain will leave the European Union, with these deadlines being pushed months further down the road. How is this impacting the European Parliament election?
Hi, Nan. Well, voting is now officially underway for these 29 EU elections, and we're, as you were saying, at the Brussels EU Parliament, which, of course, will spring into life on Sunday for the results. Now, Brexit Britain is, in fact, one of the first EU countries to go to the polls today, along, of course, with the Netherlands. It's ironic, perhaps, that the country that really shouldn't have been in the EU at this time is opening the elections for the bloc. But, as we know, in the UK, polls have predicted that the newly formed anti-EU Brexit party, led, of course, by the long-time Brexiteer Nigel Farage, will top the vote across the UK, with the ruling Tories, of course, on course for a drubbing. But what people might have actually forgotten is that the exact same thing actually happened in 2014, the last time these elections were run. The disillusioned, the disenfranchised they turned away from the ruling Conservatives and towards the UK Independence Party that Nigel Farage used to front. And even though he's never really made an impact on the domestic front in the UK, he's proven to be, you could say, the Brexit bogeyman, especially for the ruling Conservative Party. And now he's back again, just when Brexit really needed rescuing. So for the moment, Europe isn't necessarily focused on Brexit, but where Brexit could, of course, become a problem for the bloc, the Parliament has the final say on any Brexit deal with the UK. So if the Brexit Party do align themselves perhaps with their like-minded far-right colleagues, or they could just frustrate Brexit and force a no-deal Brexit and not green-light a deal. Who really knows, Adnan?
Right, Mariam, and of course we've been looking at the polls. They show that far-right politicians might become the third largest bloc in Parliament. How is the continent seeing this rise of far-right nationalist candidates? Many of them, as we do know, want big changes within the European Union.
Well, and I think, the first thing you need to understand is maybe the reasons why these fringe parties really do well here. And it's a lot to do, actually, with the voting structure itself. So every country is really divided into regions, and so you don't vote for individual MEPs. What you're voting for is a party. So the bigger share of the vote that a party gets per region, the more MEPs they then get. And that's really how these fringe parties do well. Also, many voters use the EU parliamentary elections to send a message back home to their own national governments that they're really not happy with them. So it's a kind of protest vote. But, in previous EU elections, these fringe parties were perhaps too small in numbers, or they weren't united. So they didn't really subvert EU decision-making. But 2019, that could change. As you suggest, they may break through significantly, and they could take votes away from the two big parties that really form a grand coalition in the Parliament. France's nationalist leader, Marine Le Pen, and, of course, Italy's Deputy Prime Minister, Matteo Salvini. Now, they're sort of joining forces to try to make what is now the smallest group in the Parliament that Le Pen currently heads, the Europe of Nations and Freedom, a far-right supergroup. Now, that could, of course, stir the pot in the Parliament if it ever materialises. But, of course, fringe far-right parties, they have very different ideology. Anan?
Thanks, Mariam. That's CGTN's Mariam Zaidi reporting from Brussels.